Hello, welcome to day 27 of the Advanced Business English Idioms course. Today we are looking at idioms related to leadership. Right off the bat, that means right away, right off the bat, I want to make very clear that all of the idioms that we are looking at in this collection of idioms about leadership are very informal. I really could have called it informal titles for leaders. So please bear that in mind, because when we look at these idioms, oh, look at that. I've even put a warning on it. They're all very informal. When we look at these idioms, we want to remember that, and remember that they are not appropriate to use in a workplace situation where, other than perhaps speaking with a colleague, when you are venting, so complaining or talking about people in charge in a way that's not necessarily disrespectful, but in a way that delineates a clear division between where you are and where they are. So you need to be very careful about using these, and I think they're useful to know. But it's also really important that you listen and wait until you've seen how other people are using them before you jump in and use them in your spoken communication, with the exception of decision maker, which is not like the other ones. So I think it's really important to state an idiom. What is it? Well, it is an expression that holds a different meaning to its literal meaning, and they can cause a lot of confusion in conversation. And so I think they're important to learn. It's important to know that they are used frequently by native speakers. In business, they are important for connecting in spoken English, but not so much for written English. I really recommend that you learn a lot of idioms so that you are able to listen and understand in conversations, but I also recommend that you pay attention to the idioms that are used around you in your professional environment, and pay attention to how they're used. And if you hear an idiom repeatedly, then mark that, take note of that, and use that in your spoken English, so that you are waiting to use them until you can really understand the cultural context and the professional context of how other people are using them in that environment. That's not to say you shouldn't use them in your speaking, but I think that you really want to be careful and use idioms that are very common. Okay, as always, we're going to start by looking at the idioms in context and using them all at once, which is not how a native speaker would use them, but I just want you to get a feel for them. We'll do that at the beginning and then also at the end. And hopefully at the end, it will all make more sense because you will have studied the idioms a little bit more. Okay, here we go. Oh, and actually, before we jump into it, thank you, those of you that are joining live. Welcome, and thank you for being here. And thank you to those of you on the replay. Please put any questions you have in the comment section, and please feel free to join in and have a go at using the idioms. Okay, here we go, the extract. I know you are all upset. I am too. It's disappointing to be told there is no budget for our end of year celebration, said James, continuing with, I'm not the decision maker on this. Believe me, this would be different if I were the big wig in charge. The powers that be haven't even given a reason, and that's also frustrating as well. Look, everyone, he continued, the suits have a big meeting tomorrow. I'll try and speak to one of them after. I'd like to at least get a reason for the refusal. Perhaps there is a policy change or something that came from their top brass even. I just can't figure it out, so I don't understand it. It doesn't make much sense given we had an excellent year. Okay, so the context here is that James, this person, is complaining about and talking to others he's leading and saying, it is upsetting that our bosses have cancelled our end of year celebration. They're not creating a budget for it, they're not funding it. And I'm going to try and find out why, because we don't know why at the moment. And then he uses a lot of different words to mean boss. That second paragraph begins with "look, everyone," and he's not literally saying, "Okay, look over there." Use your eyes to see in this direction. It's quite a nice phrase. It's saying, "Listen, listen for a moment." So he could say, "Okay, please listen, people. Please listen for a moment." And that's an informal way of saying that, just to say, "Look, everyone." It's like saying, "Come on, settle down," because it's a disappointing situation. Okay, let's jump in and look at the first one, a decision maker. I'll give you two examples and then we'll talk about what it means. So I would ask John. He is the decision maker in our team, so he has the final say on all major issues. If you call, make sure you do your best to speak to a decision maker so that we can get an immediate answer. So what do you think that means if someone is a decision maker and they have the final say? Well, to have the final say means to make the choice, the final choice, yes or no on something. So if you are a decision maker, you're literally someone who can make a decision. You have the authority to make important choices. So you are a leader, an authority figure, a key player. So often in sales training, they will say to people, like, it's really important that you speak to decision makers, like someone that can actually purchase. In one of the other idiom videos, we talked about people who are acting as gatekeepers. So a secretary or working in the office or someone in a position helping administratively in some way might be a gatekeeper. They might restrict access, a gatekeeper to the decision maker. They might restrict access to the decision maker and say, "Oh, sorry, that person's busy, you can't speak to them." So the decision makers often have people that help them not be overloaded by requests. So we can talk about someone being the decision maker for a specific area or department. This is the decision maker for the marketing department. Or you can often have the word consult go with that idiom, because obviously this is someone that you want to speak to make decisions. Have you ever had to be the decision maker during a difficult project? Think about projects that you've taken on, situations where you have or haven't had that authority, and I would encourage you to use this idiom right away, either by writing out a sentence or speaking out your answer. Okay, the next one, the suits. So you can see pictures of grey suits there, but obviously it's slightly different. The meaning, it's not literally the clothing. Okay, the suits were in the boardroom for hours today. We need approval from the suits before proceeding with the project. So the suits, it's very informal and it does have a disrespectful tone to it. So please be very careful how and when you're using this. But it refers to corporate executives or management, often in reference to their formal attire. So people who literally wear suits to work because they have a management or higher role, and they have authority, which is shown often by the fact that they're wearing suits. So it implies a distinct difference, saying that these people are coming in and they are visibly showing their power. So it can have a negative tone to it. So be very careful how you use that. Are informal titles such as the suits given to corporate bosses in your language? Have you got something similar to talk about the distinctions between different types of workers? I would be interested to know. And if so, is it disrespectful in tone? The suits has a kind of negative, disrespectful connotation to it. Okay, Top brass. I think the company is taking it seriously. Her complaint went all the way to the top brass. We'll need approval from the top brass before implementing any changes. Okay, there is a picture of an army hat, and I cut off the emblem on the front because I could not figure out which army this hat came from. So I wanted it to be nondescript, just to indicate that this is where this idiom comes from, is that senior people in, I believe, the British and then American, although there's some argument about where exactly it originated, but people high up in the army had very decorated hats, and so they were commonly known as the top brass, the people that had metal on their hats. So if you are the top brass, then that is meaning it refers to the highest ranking officials or authorities within an organization. This doesn't have a negative feel to it, but it's very informal. So just by the fact that it's so informal, it could be misunderstood and taken wrong. So a much more formal and appropriate thing to people at that level would be to talk about senior leadership or upper management or key executive. So if you were writing something and you were describing someone at a very high level position, you would be much better off to say someone in a senior leadership position instead of saying top brass. But if you're talking to your coworker with whom you can have a bit of banter, like friendly, joking conversations, then you might say, oh, the top brass, like the big bosses. Okay, describe a time when you had to communicate with the top brass about a problem or idea. How did it go? So a time when you had to really talk to someone at a very high, let's go back to those ones, senior leadership or upper management or key executive level. How did it go? Did you pull it off well? Was it stressful? Have you had that situation? Experiment with using top brass informally, remembering that you would never do that in writing. It's very informal and could be a bit disrespectful. Bigwig is exactly the same, but we'll talk about some examples of it. It was a great conference. All the bigwigs from several industries were there. He's done well. The success of his shop led to his own product line, and now he's a bit of a bigwig in his industry. So this originally came from a very long time ago, where men of a certain rank would wear literally big white wigs. And so the term or idiom bigwig was meant for people with a very high ranking. So this is one that top brass, bigwig, we only use in a business context. So in a business context, a bigwig is an influential business person. So could be your boss, but often we use the term bigwig to talk about someone who's really high up across the whole industry. So I don't know that VIP is exactly a synonym. It gets across that meaning that this is someone who's done very well and is very successful. But I think mogul is better, or heavyweight. Those are more formal ones. If you said this person is a music heavyweight, that's a little bit more formal. Big cheese, very informal, and kind of on the same level of informality as bigwig. Okay, here's a strange expression: to rub elbows with the bigwigs. If you rub elbows with someone, you meet them and speak with them and mix with them. And so if you are talking about, titans, moguls of your industry, it might be quite an unusual thing to mix with them. And so you'd say, I was rubbing elbows with bigwigs. I met some really influential people in my industry. Okay, describe someone who is an entertainment bigwig in your country. So remember that bigwig is just for the context of business. So if someone is in the business of entertainment, that would mean that they are, a music executive or, a movie financier. Simon Cowell is a music mogul, a music executive, a music bigwig, for example. He created Britain's Got Talent and American Idol. So Simon Cowell is a bigwig in entertainment, but this is different from a big deal in the entertainment industry. So if someone's a big deal, that means they're a VIP. That means they're well known. They're a celebrity. But big wig is just for people who are business. So can you think of someone who is an entertainment bigwig in your country? For me, it would be Simon Cowell in the UK. Okay, the powers that be. This has a very critical tone to it, so please be aware of that. I know it doesn't make sense to delay, but we have to wait for a decision from the powers that be. So criticizing the fact that we have to wait. And the second one, we have to go back to using color copies only. The powers that be have shrunk our printing budget. So again, a criticism of this decision that's come from nowhere, that's not fully understood. So, this is a little bit badly laid out. Just for that. Let's look at what it means. So the powers that be refers to those in authority or control, especially in decision-making roles. And it has a tone of their decisions not being fully understood. They're kind of coming out of thin air, out of the blue, out of thin air, out of the blue. That means like suddenly, unexpectedly, without anyone understanding where they've come from. So you could talk about more formally, you could say authorities or decision makers or those in charge. But if you say the authorities have made a decision about this, that's very neutral. If you say the powers that be have made a decision about this, that has a critical negative tone to it. So a lot of people use this idiom to refer to people in government, where we don't always understand where are these decisions coming from. Currently in the UK, the powers that be are making a lot of strange decisions about our young people. They are changing the fees that they have to pay for university, making life more difficult for them. And many people are feeling a bit as if the young people are not being cared for. They don't understand where these decisions are come from, and so people are critical of the powers that be. Do you feel that most people are fed up with, that means they've had enough of? Do you feel that most people are fed up with the powers that be in politics? I feel in the UK, people are definitely fed up with the powers that be. Okay, let's go back to the extract and let's look at it all together and hopefully it will make more sense. I know you are all upset. I am too. It's disappointing to be told there is no budget for our end of year celebration, said James, continuing with, I'm not the decision maker on this. So he's making it clear that he wasn't the one that decided not to have the party, the end of year celebration. Believe me, this would be different if I were the bigwig in charge. So if I was the boss in charge of the budget, I would have given the money over for the celebration. The powers that be, so the ones in authority and making the choice, the powers that be haven't given a reason, and that's also frustrating as well. Look, everyone, he continued, the suits, so the people that literally wear suits and are making lots of higher up decisions in the company, the suits have a big meeting tomorrow. I'll try and speak to one of them after. I'd like to at least get a reason for the refusal. Perhaps there was a policy change or something that came from their top brass even. So at this point, James is saying, I'd like to speak to our bosses and see if the decision came from higher up than them, if it came from their bosses. I just can't figure it out. It doesn't make much sense given we've had an excellent year. Okay, let's do a really short quiz. There are some basically synonyms And you need to choose which one would go with the idiom. So number 1, big wig. Does that mean A, politician, B, hair accessory, or C, important person? What would you choose, A, B, or C? And then number 2, the powers that be. Does that mean celebrities, or B, authorities in charge, or C, media personalities? Which would you say for both of those? Okay, so number 1, bigwig, that means an important person in business because it's used in a business context um, almost exclusively. And then the powers that be they are the authorities in charge. And that phrase or idiom has a bit of a critical tone towards them. Okay, that is all of our idioms related to describing leadership. Please make sure that you remember that many of these, apart from decision maker, have quite a critical, negative, and certainly very informal tone to them. So please don't use them in your workplace or your professional context unless you are talking to someone that you really know and trust. I think it's important for you to know these idioms. Don't go out calling your boss a bigwig. Oh, Nikesh, what a beautiful series of comments there. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. I get a big kick out of when people are here live, and I accept your kind words. Thank you. Thank you all of you for joining in, being here, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye.